Good morning, everybody. MG here. MG Covers bringing you a brand new sports handicapping video. Title of this video, Using Statistical Properties to Profit in NBA. Super excited about this video. I think you can get a lot of value from this. This will definitely help your NBA handicapping. Before we do that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Trying to hit our goal of 2,000 subs before the end of the year. I think we can get there a little bit behind pace-wise. So we have basically a little bit more than a month and a half. So if you're watching this video for the first time and you want to learn the unadulterated truth about sports handicapping, sports betting, it's a great channel. You can simply improve your handicapping drastically by subscribing and watching the videos. Got a ton of content. So if you're watching for the first time, welcome. If you want to follow me on social media, MG Covers spelled with a Z. Give out a lot of content on Instagram as well, and that is the same screen name on Twitter. So there's a link to follow me on Instagram in the description box. Let's dive into NBA. NBA is full and underway, and again, this is super educational. And so when you start handicapping a sport, regardless if it's baseball, football, you have to know what the statistical properties are of that sport. And statistical properties is a term that I came up with. A statistical property is basically a fact about that sport, right? For example, Major League Baseball, favorites win 60% of the time, dogs win 40% of the time. That's important, right? So that's an example. It's basically a fact about that sport. So let's take a look right now at the statistical properties for NBA. And you can see their away teams, 40%, home teams win 59% of the time in NBA. So a huge advantage for the home team. And that's not covering, that's outright. And then you can look also at favorites winning 66% of the time. That's important to note. Dogs only win 33% of the time. And look at home favorites down there at the bottom. Home favorites year-to-date in NBA are 53-22. And this, by the way, even though this is a year-to-date small sample for NBA, this is pretty much true for NBA in general. Obviously, they'll fluctuate year to year, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate. Home favorites, NBA, 70%. That's huge. So, for example, application of that real quickly, and to tell you how I do this. So, home favorites have a huge advantage in NBA. And then home dogs hitting 40%. Now, this is also important to scroll down just a little bit and look at the ATS numbers. You can see their home. Now, just because a team wins doesn't mean they're going to cover. That's very important. Home teams, 50%. So basically, there's no advantage ATS. All right. And scroll down to look at home dogs covering 53%. That's sort of important to note as well, because a lot of times the old adage, and this is somewhat true in NBA, a team that wins also covers a large majority of the time. However, not as true with NBA, because the average margin of victory, and this is important to note, in NBA is 11 points. Okay, so that's a big number for teams to cover, but a bigger spread, meaning like you'll have teams that, like example, Houston blew out the Lakers last night. I'm not sure what they won by, 20, 30 points. So you'll have big margins like that, especially when the average margin of victory is 11 points. All right. So how do we use this information? So we know that the home team has an advantage, right? And a couple things that stand out. Home favorites win 70%. That's important outright. And usually a team that wins covers. Now, when that spread gets closer to the 11, it becomes more difficult to cover. An example last night was Sacramento. I think Sacramento was -8. I think they won by 3. So that's important to note. So what we're going to focus on, we're going to focus on -5 favorites or less. And then also another application of a statistical property. Look at the bottom. ATS home dogs, 53%. And that's important because if a dog is going to cover, a lot of times they're also going to win outright. Now, it would probably be difficult for a dog to cover a big spread, but how about a smaller spread of, say, 5 points or less? All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to give you, I've got all this tracked, so at the end of this, I'll show you the results of it. So we're going to look at focusing on this is even without a model, and I'm going to show you how drastically statistical properties can improve your handicapping. We're going to look at favorites -5 or less. We're going to look at dogs at home 5 or less, but we're only going to play them on the money line if we're getting +120 or greater. Okay, so I'll repeat that. So when we go through this exercise, let's actually take a look at an actual date. We'll use Wednesday, October the 25th. So we're going to play dogs at home if we can get +120 or greater, and we're going to play favorites at home if we're getting 5 or less. The reason I came up with 5 or less, the closer you get to 11 points, the more difficult it will be for that team to cover because the average margin of victory is 11. So basically, I just cut it in half and dropped a half point. So I just sort of arbitrarily came up with that. But there's some validity to that, meaning probably it would be easier for teams overall to cover a smaller number than the bigger number. Okay? All right, so let's go through this exercise. Charlotte +4. They were at home, and we could get, let me pull up my tracker here because I got this written down. So Charlotte was +4. They were at home. We could get Charlotte for +152, and they won. So that's a win. Take a look at the next game. Indiana was -5, and they won pretty convincingly there, right? 143 to 120. Next game, New York is +4 against Boston, so we can get dog money there. Got them for +146. That was a loss. Take a look at Orlando. Orlando was -4.5 at home, blowout win over Houston, so that would be a win. All right, now this is an important one. When we come to Brooklyn, Brooklyn was +1.5 at home. So here's the deal with NBA, and this is something I'm going to show you what I did with my model. Home field advantage, based on what I've studied with my model, and I've done a ton of research on this here in the last probably 2 days. In my opinion, home court advantage is worth 3 points in NBA. What that means is if Cleveland was at home, Cleveland would be a 4.5 point favorite because you would take Cleveland's -1.5 on the road. You add 3 points to that, they would be, in this particular game, they would be -4.5. And secondly, Brooklyn, that means Brooklyn is a pretty severe dog overall. And the only reason they were, +1.5, of course, is they were at home. But we're not going to play this because we can't get +120. All right. So Miami, we would skip. Toronto's another one. We have -1 for Toronto, so that would be a win. Next one, Chicago -2.5. That's a loss. Next one, Memphis is -1. That would be a loss. Look at Sacramento, Utah. That would be a no play because Utah is +1.5. And then we have the last one there, San Antonio is +4.5. We could get San Antonio for 164, and that was a loss. Now, I'm going to take you over to this next page here, and you can see the results from that day. So Charlotte won, Indiana won, lost with New York. Now understand, when you lose a dog, as always, you pay no juice. That's why it's important, and this would be a great advice on NBA spreads of, say, maybe 5 or less. Go ahead and play it on the money line. Orlando was a win, Toronto was a win, and then lost the last 3 with Chicago, Memphis, and then San Antonio. So we ended up 4-4, but you would be profitable. Not drastically, but still profitable, cashing that big dog there with Charlotte at +152. Now, again, another problem in our industry is defining what success is in sports handicapping. For example, let me give you an unrelated example. A handicapper, a good handicapper, might post a free play, it loses drastically, and he gets shade thrown on him on Twitter and social media. The way to assess a handicapper is you have to assess their long-term results, what they can do long-term. Are they up? How many units are they up year to date? Because everybody's going to have a losing streak, a losing week, even a losing month. Same with models. I don't think people understand what a good sports betting model is. Now, this is my forte, so I am better than average. I am not as good at situationally handicapping. I mean, hell, I got clients that can situationally handicap better than me, meaning like assessing other things outside of the model, home field, injuries, maybe motivation, etc. But I am really good at models. However, a good successful sports betting model, plug and play, meaning you're just playing plays with value, is about 50%. Meaning if you can get a model to about 50%, that's actually a really good model, because if the model on its own will hit 50%, you could quote situationally handicap it and get it another 5%, get it to say 55%. Or in a case with the approach I'm showing you now, if you just play dogs, then that's definitely the case with NFL. If you're 50%, you're going to be profitable if you're playing a lot of money line dogs. All right, so basically what I did was I ran the same type concept from 1024 all the way up until 11.6. Overall, it goes 25 and 26, just under 50%. But look, it was profitable overall, 0.47 units. Again, going back to defining a good model, this on its own, again, we're not even using stats. We're just simply understanding numbers. And you can see straight from this video, if you understand statistical properties, apply those to the sport, you can drastically improve, which I'm guessing the majority of people that wager on NBA are losing money. You apply this concept and you're basically, profitable. Now, this is interesting. On spreads, this ended up going 17 and 16 minus 0.4 units. So just a little bit over 50%. Look at the money line dogs. If you just played the money line dogs, you would have been up 1.07 units. Now, that might not be impressive, but that would be basically between, let's see, 1024 to, in 2 weeks, you were earning a unit. So every 2 weeks, that would mean over the course of a season, you're going to earn about 2 units a month. NBA season is what, 5-6 months? That's 12 units a year. So again, I haven't tested this long term to know if this concept would work, but understanding the statistical properties, applying them to the lines, you can see how much drastically your handicapping can improve. So now let's take it to another level. And I'm going to tell you one change that I made to my model. What if you could understand the lines and then also how to model? I'm going to show you my model results from yesterday. Now, one thing I've done with my model, I did make a change. I've tested a bunch of different things, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the model the same, but I'm going to add 3 points to the home team. Okay. And then if I add 3 to the home team, I also have to take away 3 from the away side. Now, this is another important point. I am not saying do not play away teams, because I'm going to give you a really good example from yesterday when we look at this. So first off, let's look at my lines from yesterday. And we'll kind of go through these. Let me pull this up. Okay, the games I want to look at, Charlotte was minus 8.5 my line. And again, so my original line was minus 5.5. So if I add 3 to that, it becomes 8.5. And I have to do the same to the other side. So we had Charlotte minus 8.5. Book's line was minus 2. Philadelphia was minus 3 my line. Book's line was plus 120. Again, we're not going to take the points. We would play that on the money line. New York Knicks, huge favorites, minus 20.5. And I will tell you this about NBA. If the average margin of victory is 11 in NBA, your model should have some games that look like this, right? You should have some minus 120. It's the same deal in NFL. I mean, your model, probably the max you would see in an NFL model that's good would probably be like a minus 13, minus 14 line, because average margin of victory there is either a 3 or 7 and all the numbers in between that. So NBA, your model needs to have some big lines in there, because teams do get blown out. So we had New York Knicks minus 20.5. They were minus 9.5 at the books. Next one, scroll down, look at Houston. We had Houston minus 8. They were getting plus 108. Did make an exception there, including that on the money line, because originally when I did this was only focusing on teams where we could get plus 120. But in that case, where we're getting significant value there with the -8 against, I think Houston was what, +2.5, +3, or maybe less than that, probably +2. And then finally, look at Oklahoma City was -2.5 my line, and we could have gotten them for +118. So now let's take a look at look at the results from yesterday. See if I can pull this up. November the 8th, Wednesday. Here we go. Okay, so we'll go through this. So again, we had Charlotte at -8.5, and you can see they were -2. That was a loss. Scroll down, Philadelphia, big win for Philadelphia. They were +2.5. We could get them for +120 on the money line. That was a win. So look down at the next one, New York Knicks. And again, we're sort of making an exception here because remember originally I'd said -5.5, but we have to understand the average margin of victory is 11. So if we have our model saying Knicks are -20.5, that's a lot of value. That gives us confidence to actually play and lay a -9 line. So New York was -9.5. That was a win. The next one, look at Houston there at +2. We can play Houston at +108. That was a blowout win. And then finally, OKC was +2. I'm sorry. Yeah, they were basically +118. We could get them for -2.5. So again, just focusing on the home teams. And there's the results from day one. It basically went 4-1. And that was a huge day there tracking this. Again, I didn't play this, but immediately you're up 3.36 units. But I'm convinced this is even better playing it this way than I was before. Now, let me show you one exception with regards to away teams. And this is real important. So we go back to the model. I want you to look at this Toronto line. Toronto was -6.5. Dallas was +6.5. My line. Okay. Now, so that means if Toronto was at home, I would have made this -9.5. So that's a very solid -6.5 line for Toronto with home field or basically home court advantage already factored in. And when you look at the results of that one, Toronto actually won that one 127-116 and cashed. I'm guessing that was probably at least +150 or so. Okay, +150, +140, depending on the book. So again, that would be the situation. You say, well, when would you play an away side? That's when I would play an away side, when we have a significant amount of value and we're getting, I don't know if I would play favorites simply because home favorites win at such that high number. Meaning home away favorites don't win at a huge margin. But anyway, the point is I like playing that on the money line because all they have to do is win. If they win by 1, they don't have to cover a big number, -6, a -7, etc. So that would be a situation where I would play Toronto. So anyway, so the main takeaways from this video is use statistical properties to your advantage. NFL, dogs win. Teams that win in NFL also cover 80% of the time. So if you're going to play a dog in NFL, you might as well just play it on the money line. That's advantageous. Same thing in college football, especially if that line is less than 7, advantageous to go ahead and play it on the money line. Now with NBA, you could build a model where you strictly focus on home teams and then sprinkle in away teams when we have value there. So if you want access to these NBA rankings, power rankings, these come out every single day. Right now we have NHL. Had a ton of clients having success with NHL. I think I've gotten more client testimonials from NHL from clients this year than any other year. So it's a really solid model, especially the way that we're handicapping. $49.95. You also get access to all my coaching videos. If you want access to everything I just mentioned, in addition to all my plays, $100 a month. The best value is to join for an entire year instead of paying $100 a month, which will be $1,200 over the course of a year. You can join. It's only $500. You save about $600. There's a link to join the description box. Good luck this year with NBA and talk to you guys soon. Peace. Good morning,